We bring you these programs because we feel that all career paths for PhDs are successful career paths. There still exists a stigma that the only successful career is an academic or a faculty career. And we want to change that narrative, that whatever career path you choose is a successful one. We also want to highlight that representation matters and that we want you to see people who identify like you in the careers that you are pursuing. And we also want to help you connect with those that are willing to help you. So like our three panelists today who are willing to give their time to talk to you in a panel like this, they and many like them are also very willing to talk to you one-on-one and informational interviews that you can make connections and learn more from those who do careers that you are interested in. This is definitely not a singular effort from me or from just OCPD. It is a big collaboration amongst a few groups here at UCSF. So we and OCPD, but also collaborating with our Black Excellence in STEM Registered Campus Organization, as well as our Alumni Affairs Office, who is also a big partner. And this all really came about through the great efforts of graduate students who, before the pandemic, had a graduate student-led PhD alumni career series. And so this is really continuing the legacy that they instilled for the community here at UCSF. So just to put some faces to some entities here, these are the people who are involved. They're all here in some way, shape, or form today, either physically or at least in spirit. So you can see who was represented from OCPD, our Black Excellence in STEM group, our PhD Alumni Career Series, as well as Alumni Relations. So you see these many faces on all of these programs every month. So, please, thank you to all of you, and for all those attending, please thank them if you ever see them in person. So we also want to highlight that we ask all of our panelists these 6 common questions before they join us for sessions like this. And my colleague Rachel has dubbed these the fundamentals. You can find these online. You should have gotten a link in your email, but if not, this tiny URL, but also this QR code will take you to that page so you can hear from our panelists in the written word at least, and learn more about kind of the basics of their careers and how they got there and some of the skills needed. So this will be a resource that will be up for every alumni career path session. So we hope that you will utilize it. So just to go over a quick agenda for today, we want to make sure that you know about a great resource that is offered jointly through Alumni Affairs and OCPD, and that's UCSF Connect. And I'll ask Katie in a moment to kind of give us a quick demo of that tool. We'll have our panelists introduce themselves right before we go into a moderated Q&A, and then we always want to make sure that we leave some time for audience Q&A at the end. The recorded portion will be for until the end of moderated Q&A, so that you're free to ask questions in the audience Q&A without having to be recorded for it. So that's just an FYI. So with that, I'm going to turn over the microphone to Katie, who's going to walk us through UCSF Connect, which you can join the Alumni Careers Paths group for. So I'm going to stop my share and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here. I'm Katie, and I work in the Alumni Office, and with Sarah Yazzie in the Office of Career and Professional Development. We are the admins for UCSF Connect, which is our online networking community just for UCSF Connect. We have over 4,400 users, and everyone who has joined has opted in. And I'm going to give you a quick sneak peek into the community and give you some advice on if I was looking to find someone who worked in science communications, how would I find them in the community? And 2 things before I dive into the directory is I have created a resource document, and I'm going to scroll down here on the left side to resources. And this section called How to Search on UCSF Connect, I've created a document with some of these same tips right here, and that's something that you can download and find. I'll also add this to our group. So within the group section, there's Alumni Career Paths, and you are welcome to join this group. The team here that works to pull these together every month is part of this. Our speakers and past speakers are a part of this as well. So if you are kind of looking for a quick way to find people who have spoke about their careers, you should be able to find them here in the member directory of Alumni Career Paths. You'll also, if you look on the feed, you can see where we've posted the recordings of past events, other how-to search documents and things like that. I don't want to take up too much more time, but real quick, if I was to look for science communications, there's kind of 2 or 3 different things that I would do. The first is here on the right side of the this directory search. I'd look over here under work experience, and I'd look under industry. And if we scroll down, one of the options that when users join, they can select as their industry is science, writing, and communication. So if we click that box, we have 8 users. So not a ton of people have necessarily not everyone fills out the industry portion. One more reason why when you're filling out your profile, please make sure you have a really robust profile and you think about industry, you think about the company and job function that you're in. But these are people that maybe I'd start with. But if I wanted to expand that search, one thing I really love about the Every Month series, the Science Communications and Outreach page that Rachel just shared with you is there's a list of what are potential job titles for work in this field. And I know a lot of them have things like editor in them. So who has the word editor somewhere in their profile? And there's 25 users here. Maybe I would narrow that down to the school or program that I'm in. If I'm a graduate student, now we're down to 6. So then what I would want to do is poke around into some of these profiles, see how people are describing themselves in their work. And if they are someone that you would like to reach out to, if I went into someone's profile, I could quickly message them here through the platform. This email will send to their email inbox that they've given us when they joined UCSF Connect. So definitely think about keyword searches. Another keyword search might be writer, and we could see what we get there. And or are there publications? Are there organizations? Are there companies that you're interested in? Use those in the keyword search, or maybe for a company name over here in the work experience in the company name search. But you're not going to get the perfect search the first time. So do some different tiered searches. Maybe see, this one person's profile keeps popping up. Maybe that's a good indicator that there's someone that you're most interested in. But I just encourage you to check it out, see who's there. If someone has joined, it is that they are willing to help. And I encourage you to reach out and ask them questions. And I think hearing the questions that come up today are maybe a good start to think about what questions that you could ask, or to ask for a 20-minute Zoom coffee and learn more about their careers. So enjoy. Don't hesitate to contact me at katie.maloney@ucsf.edu or through UCSF Connect. And I'd be happy to help you in your search and help you connect with others. I'll send it back to you, Mike.
Thank you so much, Katie. Yeah, we certainly encourage all of you to join. It's free if you can sign in through your My Access credentials. And we always ask our panelists that we invite every month to also join, so that they'll be a part of that group. And I think it's just as opposed to LinkedIn, it's a great way to just identify who is willing to help, because our alumni have indicated the ways in which they are. So it's a fantastic resource. So I highly recommend everybody to sign up. So with that, let's jump into our panel for today. And I'll ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. And so the prompt is that, please tell us your career story from your time here at UCSF to your current role. including like where you studied and what you studied and how your training led to your current position. Any other factors that you feel that is important that helped guide you on where you are to where you are now. So with that, why don't we start with Roshini, and we'll just go down, let's go Karuna and then Pallavi, and we'll go on with our next questions after that. So Roshini, I'll hand the microphone to you.
Thanks, Michael. So my name is Roshini. I graduated from UCSF Pharmacy School in 2011, and I promptly went into a residency that was a combination of drug information and telepharmacy, so providing like video consults to underserved and doing their diabetes management. And then the other half of the time, I was writing to patients who would submit questions into Blue Shield. And I loved that work. I was so surprised that that was like where my heart went. And so that kind of led me to industry. I was at Genentech, where I started with the managed care medical communications group, which is, I like to explain it to folks as I was like a clinical lawyer in a way, where I was finding the clinical reasons for why a medication should be on formulary access that was more favorable. So expanding access to people. You know, if you go in to get a drug from your doctor, he might say, oh, this one isn't covered, but this one is. So trying to get that level of coverage by using clinical evidence and submitting that in. And then I just kept finding that I wasn't really using my gifts as much. I mean, I was using my training, but not necessarily my gifts. And so I tried to find a way to like be a little bit more creative at the company. And I moved to doing training and organizing training for account managers who were working with the C-suite on rebates for our products at healthcare institutions. And so I was training them on what the business of healthcare was. And so I kind of like I went from like really close to the patient, a little bit further. And when they had a reduction in workforce, I was like, do I really want to return back to training? I mean, it was definitely using more of my strengths, but I don't think it was using them to the fullest potential. So I took some time to try to figure out where did I really want to be? And I did a lot of informational interviews. And one of the things I realized is I wanted to lean into my design capabilities more. And one of the folks that I interviewed for an informational was at the School of Medicine Technology group that I'm currently with. So I think my career path is really unique. And so that can be really confusing to employers because they're like, wait, you're a pharmacist, but design. And I think because this was an academic center, they knew that they could leverage some of the clinical knowledge that I had in translation. But that may not always be apparent to other employers. So yeah, right now I help clinicians and researchers build technology projects to improve their work. And yeah, I'm really enjoying that.
Thank you so much, Roshini. Definitely not uncommon to say that no career path is linear. So you've highlighted that for sure. So Karuna, could you go next, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Karuna Meda. I first also just want to say I know it's been a stressful and traumatic week, so I hope everyone is taking care of their mental health. So I graduated from UCSF in 2017 from the neuroscience program, right at the end of 2017. And I took almost a year off for family reasons, mental health break. And in that time, I was also exploring the field of science communication and just finding out what kind of jobs were available within science communication. And panels like this, when I was a grad student, was very helpful. And so I started exploring, I first started looking into medical writer jobs, and I ended up doing an interview with a company. I'm in Philadelphia, I'm based in Philadelphia, so I had done an interview here and realized that wasn't really what I was looking for. It was very technical. It was working with pharmaceutical companies and basically trying to translate that kind of information for pharmaceutical clients. And it just wasn't really what I was looking for. And I ended up finding a science writer position at Thomas Jefferson University and hospitals. And it's the position as science writer, but my role also falls under public information officer, which I personally didn't know what that was when I was in grad school and even when I was looking for science communication jobs. And so a lot of what I do is, covering research that is going on here at Thomas Jefferson University and hospitals, and that falls under sort of basic science as well as clinical science. And Jefferson is really known for their hospital more than their sort of basic science research, and compared to a place like UCSF. So it's kind of interesting because I get to cover, both the basic side and clinical side, and then because we cover just any research, we have a College of Humanities and Social Sciences. We have architecture. There are different, colleges that cater to undergraduates, and so I've really been able to write about sort of a really broad range of topics, which I, again, didn't necessarily expect going into this job, because it really is, the title is science writer, but I'm really writing about any kind of academic and scholarly work that's coming out from our researchers here, which again are in a broad range of fields. And the other great thing about sort of being under this role of public information officer is that we get to write stories about people, the researchers themselves, which is always something that attracted me to the field of science communication. And I should mention that a big sort of driving force for me was I was part of the Carry the One radio podcast at UCSF in its sort of inception stages, along with its founder, Sama Ahmed. And that was a big driving force for me that kind of showed that storytelling side of science communication and getting to know, not just the science and the research, but the people behind the science and their stories and, how they got there and the issues that impact them. I think we're learning so much now just in these last 2 years, how much there's so much intersectionality between, all of our identities as researchers, but as human beings. And so I really enjoy that part of my job about writing stories about people and the issues that impact scientists and researchers. So I've been at this job for almost 2 years now. I joined in July of 2019. And I've learned a lot. I've learned, a lot of my job is writing, but it's also, I manage our social media account for our research community. And we're just constantly trying to figure out new ways to communicate science, whether it's graphical abstracts or videos, like, the little like chalkboard, like sped up videos. We've been doing a lot of those recently to figure out creative ways to showcase our researchers' work. That's kind of how I ended up here and how it's going.
Thank you so much, Karuna. It's coincidental you mentioned Carry the One Radio, because we're joined today by Stella Bolanwu, who will at the end share with everybody that's here what Carry the One Radio is and how to join. So we look forward to hearing from Stella a little bit later. So last but not least, Pallavi, would you mind sharing with us your career story?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Pallavi Penumetcha, and I graduated from UCSF at the end of 2018. So my journey is a little different. I kind of went into grad school knowing that I didn't want to do sort of the typical stay in academia, become a professor. So I kind of knew that from the beginning, but I had no idea what it would look like after the fact. I did always have this nugget that I really liked, how a job, I didn't know what it was, but a job that took really technical science and made it like interesting and understandable for lots of different types of audiences. But, I didn't even know how to search for that online. So I think my third year of grad school, somebody in my program who had graduated previously, she had started a company while she was in grad school called Eureka Science that makes like whiteboard videos, like what Karuna was talking about, like the sped up videos for lots of different clients, just explaining a variety of sort of scientific topics. And she actually emailed asking for if anybody was interested in helping writing scripts for those videos. So I kind of jumped on that opportunity and sort of did that throughout grad school. And that not only like gave me sort of an idea of what that type of job would look like, it was like a really fun creative outlet also, sort of doing science in a different way during grad school. And it actually ended up being sort of the way that I ultimately ended up getting this job, because I also did the MIND program my second to last year or last year. And during the time when we had to set up informational interviews, Flory was actually a connection with somebody at Weber who ended up being one of my my bosses when I worked here. So I was like sort of really interested in talking with him about this project. But Flory's the person who started Eureka Science. Her being a connection of mine on LinkedIn with my ultimate boss at Weber helped me set up that informational interview and sort of start the process of talking to them, talking to sort of other bosses in the company, and what eventually sort of led me to getting the job. And coincidentally, I actually also in my last year did an internship, sort of blog writing internship with the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine, which I also sort of got through a connection, like another former grad student worked there, and she had sort of sent out a call for if anybody was interested in sort of helping out with some blogs. She at the time was also transitioning to Weber, so at my current company. So all the sort of forces ended up sort of combining to ultimately help me get me to where I am. So I will say that I know that like it can seem kind of like ambiguous and kind of like something that's very theoretical, this whole issue of networking, which I found like very overwhelming. And I was like, I don't have a network, like I don't know anybody. But even if you feel like that, you definitely do. So it's just a matter of sort of figuring out who those people are. So those are all the sort of things that led me to my current position. And we do sort of a lot of different things. We support mainly pharmaceutical companies are our main clients, and we do sort of lots of different things for them, like supporting data milestones, preparing materials for data milestones, medical meetings, writing editorials, writing social media posts. It sort of runs the gamut depending on the client and the project, but I can talk more about that later as well.
Thank you so much, Pallavi. So Karuna, you alluded to this earlier, so it was a good segue to this question, speaking about the intersectionalities of everyone's identity. And so in relation to your career and the places where you work, this next question is about that. And can you speak about navigating either company or your field spaces holding the identity you hold? What major challenges did you face or do you face currently, and what can those entering similar spaces expect? And so I'm gonna ask Karuna to speak first, since she mentioned this in her career story as well.
Sure. Yeah. I think I like working at a university because it, I get to interact with populations of students that are students and postdocs that come from diverse backgrounds. So that was also something that I was kind of thankful for once I got to this job. I don't know that it was, being in a diverse workforce and with a diverse population is very important to me, but I didn't truly appreciate till I got here how fulfilling I found that, to be able to tell stories from diverse perspectives and be able to interact with people. And also, part of my job is writing stories that cater to our student population. And that's sort of a lot of the articles that we write are sort of resource oriented that way. And then part of my job, because we're at a hospital system, healthcare system, is to write pieces that cater to patients and consumers of healthcare, which is all of us really. But I think, again, working in a place like Philadelphia, which has its own sort of diverse sets of communities, we're constantly thinking about how to provide representation and to provide information for those different communities. So for me, that's in terms of the identities that I hold, that's been fulfilling. I think, like a lot of people of color have probably felt, especially in the last 2 years, but always, I think I will speak personally in terms of my own department and my team. Representation could be better, especially if we're, trying to, so I fall under, my job falls within the communications and marketing department at Jefferson. So all academic systems and all health systems have a marketing and communications team. And so we put out communications to the public, to our students, to, any stakeholders within our academic healthcare system. So I guess in terms of challenges, I personally wish that there was more diverse representation within the communications department. If we're trying to cater to diverse communities, then we should. It's always helpful to have people who have lived experiences of, within those communities. So that's a challenge that I think, especially given the events of the last couple of years, that's definitely at the forefront of my mind. I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Pallavi or Roshini, would you care to add? Either, you can just volunteer.
It's not something I usually consider when I'm going into a workforce. I think probably because of the job availabilities that were available to me when I came out of residency, and also because I was going into a sort of a career blend / pivot. So it was probably not as available to me to kind of like have that as a sort of filtering function. But I mean, one of the things that I actually really love about design is that that's kind of the point, right? Like you're trying to take into account all of these like perspectives so that you're designing for people, as Karuna said, with that lived experience and bringing that more to the forefront, instead of like where in healthcare it's kind of like towards the end. But so I'm finding that more and more in my work, maybe not always in my work environment.
Thank you. I saw you unmuted as well, Pallavi.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have a sort of a slightly different take on this, but as far as like holding the identity of like a scientist, that's been a little bit interesting in my current job, just because, so I'm part of a smaller team called like the Element Scientific Communications team, who are mostly made up of people who have PhDs or, have some other sort of experience in science or science communications. And there's this sort of, there's a little bit of an idea of whatever teams you work on. So there are specialists on different account teams, and whatever account teams you sort of end up on, you sort of become the science person, and you're supposed to know sort of all the science that's related to that account, which can be very intimidating. So there's a lot of, in grad school, I had a lot of sort of imposter syndrome about like, what am I doing here? So there was definitely a lot of that sort of coming into this, being like, I don't know everything about like this random immunological disease that I've never even heard of. So like at the beginning, that was quite intimidating, being seen as like, sort of the scientist who knows all the science. So you kind of learn to level set and stuff as you go along. But that was sort of an interesting sort of piece of figuring out my identity within the sort of larger context of the team. But if I'm going with what Karuna and Roshini were talking about, yeah, we could definitely have a lot more sort of diversity and representation in my company as well.
Thank you all for your candid answers. Our next question is related to kind of thinking about how you got your current position and asking what has been most pivotal in getting to the position that you have now. And I will ask Roshini to start, please.
Most pivotal, I would say, is I think I was like learning and experimenting with each job I had, because I would go into it thinking, okay, this is going to be the one. I'm going to love this. And then I start doing it, or I've done it for like a year and a half, and I feel like I know everything, and I'm like, I don't want to like, I don't feel like I'm continuing to grow, or it's just like using, things that are just making me feel like de-energized. Or so I think with each job I found like a new like learning, which I was able to like then reflect on and be like, what do I really want to do? And so that was like a journey on its own. And so I feel like reflection and self-awareness and finding like when you're actually in that, zone, and then talking to a lot of people, because it's not obvious what's available out there. And people really do have you in this box of like, you've got this doctorate and this is what we expect you to do. And we do not expect you to be able to be crossing into these other paths, and kind of showing people and having like artifacts that could actually like speak to like, yes, no, I can do this. Look at this, which is one of the nice things about portfolios, or if you're a scientific writer, having like artifacts of writing where people are like, oh no, I'm sorry, you can do this. And I've had a lot of cases where just sharing the artifacts helps shift people's minds. But I would say reflection is a big part of it. And then meeting people to kind of find those nuggets of information about where I could put what I wanted to use. Similar to Pallavi, it's just, you just don't know everything that's out there.
Pallavi or Karuna, I can ask either one of you to contribute.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree with that. And, kind of like I was saying before, is I feel like for me, the most pivotal thing was experience, having sort of a portfolio of things to show people through my work at Eureka mainly. And then, ultimately with my internship at CERM as well. So I think just basically showing that you're interested in using your sort of the skill set that everybody thinks that you have to do something else that's sort of valuable to what your ultimate goal is like really, really valuable. And, having at least one or two pieces that you can show people is really helpful. And a lot of job applications will end up asking for it. Or in my case, several of the jobs that I applied for, I had to submit writing samples, but for Weber, I ended up having to do like a writing sample for them, like on a topic they provided, and then doing a presentation. So, having those in your back pocket is helpful, but you also might have to just show those skills in other ways in the process as well.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think like Pallavi was saying, I also had to do a writing test as part of my interview. And in terms of, a lot of my job now it's writing, but it's, again, like I said, it's different formats. And I think that's where the experience with Carry the One really helped, even though it wasn't, it's podcasting versus writing. But I think, even in the podcasting world, you're writing scripts, you're producing, you're thinking about that storytelling. So that really helped. And then I ended up putting in my resume, I had done things in college that were more sort of traditionally science journalist, science writing stuff. So I included those samples. And, it didn't hurt. I think it helped, if anything, even though it was from a way back and I probably wasn't a great writer in college, but it was a good thing to include. I wanted to mention in that sort of year that I was exploring science communication, I don't know if it's pivotal, but something that really helped me was social media, and just finding out, meeting people on social media, on Twitter, who were in different science communication fields, and just getting a feel for what was out there. I think a lot of grad students and postdocs are on Twitter now, and they're having these conversations about all of these different, non-academic fields. And so that was a great tool for me when I was trying to find out about different internships. I ended up volunteering for different things, podcasts. There's a great resource called Massive Science Consortium, and they have these little training modules for grad students and postdocs, trainees who are interested in doing science communication. And I found out about those things through social media. So it's, I know social media can be, a black hole sometimes, but I did find it helpful when I was exploring careers.
Thank you to all of you. My next question is related to values, and something that I often talk about with students and postdocs that I advise one-on-one is that how values influence kind of your career happiness more so than are you doing the things that you're good at, the skills you have, or the things that you're interested in. Because if you end up in a work environment where your values are not met, you'll be miserable, even if you're doing things that you love to do. And those can be values that are both tangible or intrinsic, so not tangible things. So I ask all of you, from thinking about what your values were when you were a student, what were the ones that got met from your first role after your student experience, and which were not? And then how have your values changed over time? And this question is for all of you as well. So I'll say volunteer if you would like to answer that question.
I can go first.
Sure.
Yeah, so I feel like for me, doing something that in grad school, there's a lot of obviously there's lots of ups, there's lots of downs, and there's a lot of where you're trying to figure stuff out. There's a lot of failure. And for me, a lot of the time I just felt like, wow, I'm not useful. Nothing I'm doing is useful. Nothing I'm doing is helping anybody. I felt a lot of that. And I felt like, I wanted to do something where I could put something out, be sort of a useful member of a team, contribute in some sort of tangible, concrete way that helped a team move a goal forward or brought a creative idea that helped make a project move forward in a different way. And that is something that I felt like the lab wasn't really sort of doing it for me. That wasn't sort of the arena where I could really, feel those things or, make those things more concrete in my mind. And so I feel like in this role, you have sort of, while our specific roles change depending again on the project and the client, you do have more of sort of a defined space that you get to work in, which I think helps sort of bring out your abilities and your ideas to make sort of meaningful contributions in sort of very concrete ways. And the other thing in grad school that I felt like I was missing is that you go a long time and you don't see anything advance further. Here, the time scale is within a day, things change, you've accomplished a project, you move on to something else. So, sometimes that can be a little too fast paced, but it was concrete things that you could feel like you were accomplishing every day. And, being able to put sort of a scientific perspective or thinking cap on behind things, sort of helps put some weight behind some of these projects. So, that part, I sort of feel like being a useful, valuable member of a team, I feel like has been really nice with just this job and sort of getting to see your progress in real time much quicker as well.
Thank you so much. Roshini?
Yeah, I'm going to just share my screen because I was not that... I don't think I was fully as as together in terms of knowing what my values were when I graduated. In fact, I think once I came to Genentech and I was there for a while, I had to take some time off to actually reflect on values and what was important to me. And also my managers kept changing. So I needed a way to like reflect what I was interested in. So I kind of created this infographic tool for them with like, here are my values. Here's what I'm strong at. Here's what I care about. And they actually found this too overwhelming. So, and they didn't know what to do with it. So, I mean, knowing your values is one thing. Finding environments where they're like, that's appreciated is something entirely different and is really difficult. I mean, even I think I actually made the mistake of mostly going after areas where my interests are and not so much where my values are, because it is so difficult to find companies that align with it. I mean, they might say that on the website, but in day-to-day activities, like it's hard to see that lived. Or you might find it in this amazing manager, but then the company reorganizes and you can't follow that manager. Or you have amazing coworkers and you're like, they share all your values, but then they move. So, actually, I would love to hear, Michael, since that's one of like the things that you're recommending. What about all the transition that happens when you find that environment that matches with your values? It's still a journey for me.
Is that you're asking me? Is that the question?
Oh yeah, because that was the point that you were like, in studies it has shown that finding places that align with your values more than the strengths that you have is something that will indicate career success. But I find that very difficult to do in real time because of so many of the moving parts.
Yeah, I mean, very briefly, when I'm meeting with people, I always assess where are they in the process, being that figuring out what your values are is step one, and making that and finding out what they are to start can then help guide your career explorations afterward, especially when you're doing informational interviews, because you can then ask questions that are value-based so that you can get closer to finding that company, like you mentioned, that shares your values, or those people with whom you work that will share your values, because that is, I think, more pivotal, more important than I'm doing things I love and I'm interested in. Because like you said, you may end up in a place where they're overwhelmed by the discussion of these are my values and they don't know what to do with it. So
yeah, no, that's helpful. It's like concentric circles. So it's like my values, does it align with my direct manager? Does it align with my colleagues? Does it align with the company at large? And if you don't actually have a clear through line through all of them, it's probably really, and that's just super hard to find. It's like a unicorn to find that.
For sure. I find I make that clear too, that you will rarely find a place where all of your values are met, but that it's important to prioritize them and figure out what your deal breakers are. And that if you discover a career or a path or a company that violates those deal breakers, that you made the decision in advance that you will say no, even if it looks great and sounds great. So, but I also want to give Karuna a chance to contribute if you want to. If not, that's fine too.
I think what Roshini and Pallavi said are certainly things I agree with. I think it is very hard to, I think, when I was doing things like my IDP, I saw Rachel just post that in the chat. I think it was hard to identify, values and things that are sort of intrinsic and tangible. But I think it's also just kind of like a gut feel once you get to a place and, like Michael, like you were saying, if something just doesn't sit right, I think it's just paying attention to that. And I think especially when this is my first job out of grad school, and I'm definitely still learning a lot about what my values are and what I'm looking for in a job, in my coworkers and in sort of working environment. But I think, just paying attention to it. And I think, as coming out of grad school, I think all of us have remnants of imposter syndrome. So sometimes it's easy to be like, oh, maybe I'm just being picky or selective, or maybe it's something that I need to sort of just, suck it up and deal with. But I think just paying attention to that voice, if something doesn't sit right, then, I think that's an embodiment a value that you hold. So yeah, that's something that I'm learning too.
Thank you all for your honesty about all that too. It's one of the things that I find most important and always try to stress in all of my programs and career conversations, because I think it is pivotal. Turning our attention to more skill-related things, moving on from values, and that is, what skill or skills set did you get in your training that you use regularly, but also what skills did you need to learn that you didn't pick up in grad school? And Karuna, I'll start with you, since you just ended talking as well.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of when I think about my training in the sort of the PhD program that helped, a lot of what I do is writing press releases for publications that researchers put out. So definitely, reading a paper quickly, digesting that information, getting the key points, getting the key takeaways. That's something that, journal clubs helped with, just reading papers in general for my project that helped with understanding that. I think one skill that I really had to develop here, though, in my current job, was not reading for those finer details. I think obviously as you're going through your project, you're sort of looking at what did they do wrong, and what could they have done differently. Here it's like you're really trying to get through. That was something that I learned in the beginning. I was going through the whole paper and my manager was like, oh, you don't need to, I was out like going through figures and stuff, and that's definitely not something that is required for this job. It's really getting to what is that sort of newsworthy headline that we're trying to pull out of this paper. Why would people care about it? And so that's a lot of my job now is taking something that is a scientific publication that can be dry, technical, and trying to figure out why should people care about this? Why should a broad audience care about this? And so that's been a skill that I've been trying to hone. And then in terms of my the types of articles that we write, again, like I said, because we're catering to patients and healthcare consumers as well as students, they're just different types of article styles. So there's, tips pieces, sort of quick tips that people can grab, sort of news you can use. And then there's more, sometimes we do more in-depth features and narratives, especially when it comes to topics that are, that are worth exploring, and doesn't really fit for something like a tips or Q&A. So there are all of these different types of writing styles that I've had to learn. And then, like I was mentioning, we're trying to figure out different creative ways to tell these science stories. So even these, it's very similar to the Eureka Science videos. It's called Animate Your Science. I think it's a group from the Max Planck Institute that started that. And so we've been doing these science sketches that they developed. And so even learning that was a skill, sort of, it's again, something that we put out on Twitter. So it's a 2-minute, 20-second video. So trying to, I think the biggest skill that I've taken from grad school is, taking a lot of information, but the skill that I've had to really hone in this current job is to make it really concise. And, you don't get a paper's worth of characters or words to describe something. You really have to be concise and to the point. And so that's a skill that I'm, again, developing every day.
Roshini or Pallavi, would you like to contribute?
Sure. I would say the thing that I gained from pharmacy school was like an insider's understanding of healthcare and science, which I think brings credibility when I walk into those rooms where there's oftentimes for product teams, there aren't a lot of science professionals. There might be a STEM professional, they might be engineering, but they don't know healthcare from pharma to an academic medical institution. So just having that background is helpful, but also then having the language for when you do meet subject matter experts so that they're like, you're kind of bridging the gap between the people who don't have that expertise and the people who do, and being able to translate. So just having the language skills so everyone can get on the same page. And I would say problem solving, because so much of what we do is like problem solving, but it's the depths of it, right? Like I think the nitty gritty of problem solving I got from pharmacy school. The part that I didn't get was being able to elevate what the problem was to all the other people in the room. Mainly because when you're in a healthcare system, everybody speaks the same language in a sense. Everyone understands when you're like talking about T cell signal, da, 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 da. Like everyone gets that. But if you don't have everyone who speaks the same language in a way, then you need to be able to elevate what the problem is in a way that everyone can understand it. Similar to what Karuna was saying about having what's that nugget of information that you can pull out. And I don't think I got that. So it's like, I would say the things that I didn't get was stakeholder management, which is huge, about setting expectations, what you can deliver up front. All of that stuff I had to learn on the fly, and it's super painful. And I wish I'd gotten more of that at school. Most of what I got at school was listen to your preceptor, fall in line. And it was very little about how do you manage up. So that's something I did not get and was painful learning in the work environment. And then also elevating a problem to get alignment with non-technical audiences.
I'll just echo quickly a lot of what Roshini and Karuna already said, but I would say that this skill that I probably learned, and it's going to sound kind of like, well, duh, is critical thinking and being skeptical. You will be surprised how far those get you outside of UCSF. Like when you're there in whatever program you're in, it's really hard to sort of see it because you're just surrounded by people who are doing it all the time as sort of like a baseline, thing. And you're surrounded by super smart people. But like the ability to be, just think about something for a second, be skeptical, make sure that the way that something is presented, like, does it make sense? Does it make sense in these different scenarios? Like that kind of thing is actually like super valuable. Even in science communications, it might not sound like it, but it's a big part of like various things that I have to do. So that actually came in handy. And that was something that sort of my boss on the team also said. He said, the main part of your job is to be skeptical and consider sort of all angles of a problem or a potential solution. And then as far as the skill I'm still trying to hone, it's very similar to Karuna's, is writing for different audiences and then figuring out how to not get lost in the details. Because like as a scientist, you think all those details are important and other people are going to care about them and that they'll understand all the context. And it's rarely the case. There's generally always a way to simplify. So I'm still attempting to sort of make myself do that every single time.
Thank you, all of you. So similar vein, I think this might be the last question. We'll see how we are on time. So I want to give time to Stella, as well as time for everybody to ask their own questions. So for this next one, it's more, I guess, environment or just workplace related. And it's thinking, I know two of you work in an academic setting at the moment, but I want to ask, what surprised you the most about working in, I guess, a non-academic space or a space that wasn't research or pharmacy explicitly? That, what surprised you when you moved out of school or in your lab that, that you didn't expect about like the professional space you were in right after grad school or that you're currently in? And also open to all of you.
I think I would say I'm still learning a lot, I think, which is fun. I think especially when you're in research and you're in grad school and you're, doing these experiments, you're asking questions all the time. And I think something that I was afraid of leaving grad school was not having that opportunity to keep or to, further that curiosity or to keep asking questions. And I think the nice thing about being in a position where I'm out of that bubble in a lot of that sense. I'm not in my one sort of studying chronic pain. That was my bubble, and I'm there. It's a freedom that I actually really like, and I get to ask a lot of questions, and I get to. It's a really unique kind of like how Roshini was talking about, when you're interviewing subject matter, when you're sort of that interface between subject matter experts and sort of a broader audience, it's a really unique position because you do get to leverage your own expertise and your own, I think, I'm trying to appreciate that having a doctorate brings value. Like we were just talking about, there are a lot of skills, and having that confidence in your own knowledge base and your own skill set. And I think you can leverage that to, relate to subject matter experts, but then you can also sort of enjoy that freedom of being out of that bubble to now interface with a much broader audience. And so I think I've realized that I'm still able to ask a lot of questions. I'm still able to do research in a lot of senses. I mean, I'm still, because I'm out of that bubble, I have to do some background reading, or if there's a topic that I've never heard about, it's definitely research in its own way. And so I think especially a lot of these sort of self-imposed stigmas that we may have because of sort of, the culture in academia that's been there for so long in terms of, pursuing a non-academic, non-traditional, let's not say non-traditional, non-academic career path. I think there's some of these conceptions that like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do some of these things, but I think those are some surprising things that no matter where you end up, I think there's a lot that you can still learn, and there's a lot of questions that you can still ask.
Indeed. Thank you very much. Roshini or Pallavi?
I would say the thing that was surprising to me in business context is just how important concise communication is. I will say that in academic centers, it is really hard to come out of a meeting really just understanding what everyone's point of view is, because people can go on for quite some time about like their points of view. And I think that's appreciated in those settings, but in business settings, they're really not appreciated. And you build credibility and political power by being concise in how you speak. So that was something that I continue to still strive to practice on. And then the other surprising thing was just how long it actually takes to be considered credible in any different environment. Like it might be shorter in some environments. In academic environments, it can take almost like decades, whereas like in business environments, it can take like a few years. And so you kind of have like, you're almost like very, very protective of what your personal brand is and how you show up. And sometimes that can be really exhausting. So I think those were different things. And those are actually things that move your work forward faster than actually like having great work. It's something about like the people who see the work and then can also amplify it. So I found all of that very interesting and not expected.
Thank you so much. Pallavi?
Yeah, I had this. Yeah, there was just, this was actually from a colleague of mine who works at Weber, who's actually also a UCSF alum, but it was a good point. So I wanted to bring it up. There, for SciComms, at least, there can be this perception that you have to be sort of really outgoing and stuff and like want to put yourself out there in order to be sort of successful in the field, but that's definitely not true. I'm 100% an introvert and I still have my job, so it's all good. But so that, it's sort of finding ways to, quiet forms of leadership. There are lots of ways that you can kind of like make your mark in a company. But as far as like what was surprising or new, everything was new. Like the first month, I didn't like people were using acronyms. I did not know what they were talking about, like both office-based acronyms and for clinical trials. A lot of what we do is very like clinical trial based because a lot of our clients are pharmaceutical companies. So it's helping with particular products or medicines. And all of that was completely new to me because, my PhD was in very, sort of baby bio. So, yeah, basically everything was new. It was a very steep learning curve at the beginning, but they also did a really good job of level setting. Like as soon as they got there, they were like, you're not really going to understand what's happening for 6 months, and that's fine. And it'll take you at least 2 years to actually be like, sort of good at what you're doing and really understand the environments and stuff. So I just went with it.
Well, thank you to the three of you for your answers to that question, as well as to the ones that preceded it. I want to shift a little bit. Many of you mentioned, the importance of having a portfolio or having shown some demonstration of, that you're interested in this work and having examples thereof. And so I want to hand it off to Stella, who will highlight Carry the One Radio, which is mentioned earlier, and how it is a resource for doing just that. So Stella, thank you for coming, by the way, and I will hand the mic over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Well, I'm here to tell you about Carry the One Radio, and it's exciting to see Karuna here. I actually have never met her, but thanks for creating it. I'm going to share my screen now.
It was really Sama. I just helped. And Brian Siebold.
Okay, so Carry the One Radio, we're founded in 2009 by Karuna, Brian, and Sama. And so what we do is that we interview people about their work. First of all, we try to identify a topic or a subject, something that we're interested in. Recently, we started doing a spotlight series where we talk to scientists about, like young scientists, about like their path through science, and if they want to talk about anything that interests them in their own personal life or any issue like in the science world that they're really passionate about. And so we kind of go through the process of creating a podcast where we identify people, we research them, interview them, and we also go through this phase where we have workshops and we talk about what can we really grab from this interview, like what seems the most interesting, how do we want to arrange this story. And so it really helps you kind of build skills with storytelling. And so kind of like how they talked about building skills and trying to get prepared for careers in science communication. I think with podcasting, you really get to be very creative, not only with the questions you're asking, but also like designing thumbnails and also like writing up your episode and thinking about how you really want to tell people about it and thinking about your audience, which is like the most important thing. And I think it really helps you become a better thinker, to like really critically think about things and ideas and how you want to really tell the story. And you also get some experience with social media. This is something that we're still, very new with and trying to get better at, but we do create like some sort of press releases for our episodes. And one thing I think that's been really important is the workshop aspect, where we actually have a few where we talk about, voice modulation, how you want to like talk when you're interviewing, when you're recording yourself, for narration. We do some audio editing as well, and also like graphic design. And so there's still a lot of room to grow. So we welcome any students, professional students. If you're interested, we have meetings every Tuesday at 6 p.m. and it's on Zoom now until we're reunited. And then it'll be in person and there'll be food. So so feel free to ask me any questions about it.
Thank you so much, Stella. I greatly appreciate you coming and telling all of us about Carry the One Radio.